So welcome. Yeah, my name is Susie Braams, and despite my background, I'm sadly not in San Francisco. I'm in the less exotic location of Southeast London. And I'm going to be hosting this fireside chat with Professor Dr. Lysander Weiss today. So just briefly about me, because this is all about Lysander and his white paper and his thoughts on strategic innovation. But the reason why Hans asked me to host this fireside chat with Lysander is because of my own interest and passion in strategic innovation. So my background is 20 years in the UK government. I did 2 head of innovation roles that were quite different. The first one was very much around running incubators and doing new products and capability development. The second one was on building the innovation capability of the entire organization. And we were very much into starting to look at exactly what Lysander's going to talk today around how do you do future thinking strategy, and how do you align innovation activity to achieve those strategic outcomes and set up an organization for systematic success in innovation. So hard to do, and I have lots of battle wounds and scars from trying to do so. And today I provide training, coaching and advisory on innovation, leadership and strategy. But as I said, today we are here to hear from Lysander on this topic of strategic innovation. And Lysander and his colleagues at Venture Idea Consulting firm have written a white paper on how to set up for strategic innovation to be successful. So Lysander, welcome. Please, let's start. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everybody and just tell us a bit about you to get us going.
Sure. Thanks, Susie, for the nice introduction, and Hans for setting it up again. Very interesting questions already from everybody on the topic, so I'm excited to discuss them. Shortly to me. So I'm just very interested in really rethinking, especially existing organizations, bringing them into the future, which of course requires innovation more and more. And I try to do this through theory and practice. So theory, I did my PhD in economics and business. I'm still in a research group in Leipzig, HHL Leipzig Graduate School of Management, so a business school in Germany where I'm based. I'm also adjunct professor at a business school in India and a lecturer at some other international business schools, usually focusing on corporate innovation, entrepreneurship. So I think exactly the topic of everybody here. And I also try to practice what I teach and vice versa for over 10 years, consulting medium and large firms, especially at the intersection of strategy, innovation, and organization, because this intersection is usually required to bring them into the future when the future looks uncertain. And so I'm working with, as Susie already said, with some other experts together at Venture Idea, to work with management of firms, especially in the European area on that. We will get some glimpse of this theory and practice today, hopefully, in our discussion, because my mission usually, besides helping the companies, is to really then bridge theory and practice in both ways to that way improve organizations through the new insights that have some good foundation academia, and also to improve the relevancy of the research in academia to tackle relevant problems from organizations. So that's more or less quick introduction. I will also drop maybe my LinkedIn here. So if you want to connect more later on, just drop me a message. But now we can dive into the discussion, Susie.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lysander. Yeah, I mean, a really interesting background that you've had, and so well qualified as well to talk on this topic. Given that journey, my first question for you is really the topic of your white paper, which it'd be great actually if you could introduce that topic, but I guess how you come to it, why does this matter to you? Why do you think it's important, and how did this? Why did you write this white paper? How did it come about?
Yeah, so I mean, as you say, it's more about the topic than the white paper specifically. I think Andrea posted it here as a backup resource, but it's a topic we want to talk about. And the topic is really like how to actually achieve strategic innovation. What does it mean? How to actually, leverage innovation to add value to the company. And I know everybody's doing innovation, and you can do a lot of fun things in innovation, but it's quite difficult to actually add relevant strategic value through doing that. But the thing is, and that's why we wrote it, is that it's more and more required in companies to get value from innovation, because we just discussed it in our little group a little bit already, that in a lot of companies, with all the fast changes we know, with technology, regulation, etc., it's pretty fast that business is, you can't do business in the future how you did it in the past. I think for a lot of years, a lot of industries or companies got along with basically, having a more or less stable business model and exploiting and optimizing it, and then having innovation on the side to maybe have some surprises. But when your future business in a few years won't be the business you're doing now, then you actually need to be able to do innovation systematically. You have to know that something comes out of it that will bring your company in the future. You need to get some future business out of it. And so the question is really, how can you merge innovation and strategy, or how can you leverage innovation and systematically innovate for the future of your company? I think Daniel in our little chat had a very good example from a utility company where he's working, where you can really see that, selling more or less fossil energy won't be the business that they have in the future. There's regulation that makes their profit margins very slim. There's huge chunks of energy that will just go away, hopefully. And there's a lot of decentralization, which means people produce their own energy. What do you sell to them? So you see that if you have these questions, and you could find examples in a lot of other industries, automotive, health, etc., then it becomes clear that you need innovation to succeed in the future, to have profitable growth in the future, to fulfill your purpose. And that's why it's so important to look a bit systematic on how do you build your innovation up then to really deliver that value.
Yeah. So it was interesting. The breakout group I was in just now, that exactly your point there, came up. And I think one of them described it as, our company, our cash cow is dying. I think Johan said that. And, that realization, is it's about the future, isn't it, of the company, and what on earth is it going to do and look like? I wanted to ask you, because a question I get asked a lot, Lysander, I don't know if you get asked this as well, but is people often ask me whether there should be a difference between corporate strategy and innovation strategy, whether they should be separate or should they be the same thing. And I was interested to know what your view is on that.
Yeah, so I think it goes a bit in the point. I mean, in the end, it's an organizational question, but traditionally it's separate because a lot of companies could afford to separate it, right? Because strategy basically looks at the current business and then last planning a few percent more, maybe some M&A, maybe some other things, and some strategic fields, etc. While innovation would look into really new things and so on that are a bit disconnected from it, maybe. But as I said, now you have to kind of merge it, because if you need innovation to define your future growth or your future strategy, you can't really do it separate. It doesn't matter then so much if you have one department which is strategy and innovation, or if just both departments, which I also see in practice, work very closely with each other and still have a bit of different tasks. Obviously, both is possible, but I would definitely try somehow to merge it or have a good interface. And also, I think in a session like a year ago or something, I think here as well, from our research, I described a bit also the concept of a strategy lab. So you might want to think about this concept of innovation labs, which, have a pretty good methodology to develop new and all the skills to develop new ideas and so on, but they do it basically independent, more or less, from the company. Why not applying this to actually, have a good method and skill and system to develop new strategic fields for your business, in which you actually develop strategically relevant business. And this kind of strategy lab would need both, because also strategy, in uncertainty, it needs to learn a lot from innovation. You need to be able to quickly test assumptions and make assumptions instead of, planning everything ahead, etc. So both sides really need each other. And that's, I think, the major answer here.
So what happens in your experience when you've got a situation where corporate strategy either doesn't exist or is very immature in terms of its development and approach? And I'm sure we have all worked in, if we're not currently, organizations where the strategy is somewhat farcical. I actually wrote an article on this once, the 7 types of not actually strategy. And so when you haven't got like a clear corporate strategy to hook onto, what is your suggestion for people in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's okay, because you don't need necessarily what maybe in the past we understood as strategy, in terms of you need a 5-year plan, and then, in this kind of field we should do innovation, because anyway, who can plan for the next 5 years? If we look at the last 5 years, nobody planned this probably. So what you need is and if it's not there, you have to get it from the board or whoever. What you need is just a kind of strategic frame. You need a purpose, you need some strategic objectives, which should be not specific any to innovation, not even, just like that's what we want as a company. And then you can see, okay, what does a company might achieve with what they're currently doing, and then you have kind of a gap that you have to fill with innovation, be it organically or inorganically. But that's basically all you need, right? The purpose, some goals, some gap to fill, maybe. And the last is not even that important. You can also just work with objectives, and from there you can actually start building up. Then if you don't have strategic field then and so on, then you can create them from innovation. Then you can go and say, okay, let's build up, let's look at the chance and risks in the market. Let's build up a portfolio, how to address them. And then let's create, and then you can always rate them on this strategic frame. And that way you go. But what you need, again, if it's not strategy, then you need a connection to the top management team or the board or something to set the frame, and sometimes check your fields, your projects, your portfolio you're developing with them to decide again, okay, now we see these 10 directions, maybe we go on these 3. So then you can lead them a bit to a strategic innovation or innovation strategy, however you want to do it. Because the frame, you can get it. You don't need a strategy department for that, right?
Yeah, I like that. And actually, that was my next question for you is, whose job is it to set an innovation strategy and decide on the focus? And should it be top down, or should it be bottom up? Or how do you see that working in practice?
Yeah. So, I think it was partly answered that you need a kind of top-down frame for it, with which you can work. I think it's also good if you can make sure that you have some capabilities and skills and methods to be able to then develop some topics or portfolio. But really the ideas or the topics then can come from everywhere. So it's a kind of top-down, bottom-up, right? But of course, if you want to have strategic value, it won't be enough to run an idea campaign and see what people are coming up with, because you might not have anything relevant, and how often you want to run the campaign. But of course, if you already have some goals and maybe even some fields, and you can add them and review them, and then you can really take ideas from everywhere, because you have a kind of system in which you will always sort them and review them and assess them in the same way, and make sure again continuously you're going in a relevant direction to fulfill your purpose, your objectives. And that way you're coming into a kind of more agile strategy instead of, setting an innovation strategy that you execute. I mean, it's innovation strategy that won't happen. But, if you think for the strategy more, if you think more in terms of I'm building a portfolio to fulfill the goals, and I will continuously review and adjust the portfolio depending on what I learn and what happens, then you're automatically getting, and that's definitely a job that whoever is responsible for innovation, VP innovation or maybe even a board member, sometimes it's the CTO or whatever, should do. Because, I mean, it's easy to be comfortable in innovation and just say, okay, but it's not our job. We do ideas and the management has to do our strategy. But then innovation will never play this role. And in the worst case, the company has a problem in some time. So you have to leave a bit this comfort zone and kind of drive the management often. It's really the case.
I mean, I'm in complete agreement with what you've just said, and I'm certainly not one of the, let 1,000 flowers bloom kind of approach, particularly, I guess, having worked in government, money was always tight, people were tight, all types of resources were tight. And I always felt it was essential that we focus those things on the things that could have most strategic impact and value. But one, I guess, complaint I've heard back from innovators, not innovators, but people innovating inside organizations, is that some people feel this constrains their creativity and the potential for innovation. And in particular, that when strategic intention is set for innovation, that you're never going to get anything more ambitious than incremental innovation, because particularly in a traditional organization that's been around for a long time, it can be quite hard for people to think about something different. Like, what's your response to that? How do you take that?
Maybe a bit of a little theoretical thing and then coming to the practice. First of all, I think whatever you define, you can find really innovative things. So, between 0 and 1, you have as many indefinite possibilities as between 0 and infinity. So in whatever area, small or big, you innovate, you have basically infinitive solutions you could find. And there's a lot of studies that even show that more restrictions often make you find more innovative solutions, because you have to so the brain is usually lazy, so it will go the easiest way. So only if you get some restrictions, then you actually have to think further. I see it often, for instance, research development units, they are very technologically focused, and it's very nice for the people to have a playground. They can find some new cool technologies, and it doesn't matter if it's like a business model behind or that relevant. Their job is to check out cool new technology. But then if you actually tell them, okay, but if it's a new idea, we also want to see how it fits to the objectives. So maybe we need to get some assumptions how to earn money with it, well, we can apply it. Is it in what kind of markets does it go, etc. And then they actually have to activate the brain more and think about these things, and might come to very new and very innovative and even more radical innovations. So generally, I wouldn't say that, any focus or restriction prevents more radical or less, rather the opposite. And also concretely, I see that you define basically a frame. So you define objectives, you maybe define some focus fields, but within you never define the specific ways. You don't tell them, now develop me a business model for renewable energy with that and that. You give a frame, and then people can be creative, but it's really nice because they know in which frame in the end, things will be assessed and they run in the right direction. And you can have very, very innovative things if you don't define it too strictly to do that. So I don't think there's really this problem. I do know these complaints, but I think it's just because you need a bit of change in your mindset, that you're not in the free playground anymore, and that was maybe nice. But if you go through it, you will win a lot of satisfaction, because you will actually be much more sure to create value, and in the long term, I think that feels much better than just be able to do whatever you want for some years, but knowing in the back it doesn't really matter.
That makes perfect sense to me. We've got a couple of questions in the chat that I want to bring in, because they relate to exactly what we're talking about now. I want to check. I think, Dennis, I just want to check. I think probably the last question I just asked is relates to that. Yeah, thumbs up, brilliant. Okay, and I just wanted to bring Ollie in. I don't know if you're happy to come off mic a minute, Ollie. Otherwise, I can just read out like your comment in the chat. But it would be interesting, I think, for everyone and myself and Lysander to hear more about that.
Yes, happy to. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. So I'm based in Mott MacDonald, which is a global engineering management development consultancy. And our approach to innovation is a distributed model. So at a group level, we have group policies attached to the various sort of business trajectories, interests, etc. One of that is innovation, and therefore we have a group level innovation strategy. Therefore, that strategy is much more along the lines of, stating why innovation is important to the business, why the business needs it, and then outline the mechanisms that we want to innovate as a business. As part of that is setting ambition. Because we have a distributed model, we don't at a group level innovate, our business units do, which are within that distributed model. So our strategy will never say this is how much you're doing. It's more for yourself to be able to understand how much you want to and what the sort of best mechanisms should be within the org environment to be doing what you want to do. With that strategy is then cascaded into a plan. Those plans are usually written on an annual level, and that is much more the tangible, these are the things we are doing. This is our portfolio. This is our portfolio approach. This is how we're translating the how to innovate in our strategy into the exact mechanism with tangible aims. So like, we're going to be doing this in this sort of time window with these people, with these expectations, etc. I think that sums it up, sorry.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ollie. And that's something else you go into as well, isn't it, Lysander, how to actually take the kind of strategic ambition and then implement it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, there's always, every company defines things a bit differently, but in the end, it's important that the elements are there. I would, now usually put them under the bucket of innovation strategy in a way. And of course, the strategy is followed by a plan and yeah, usually recommend a bit what you also described, Ollie, then to transfer it into a kind of portfolio framework where you assess and plan and so on your things. Less a plan because more portfolio than a plan, right? Because you can't plan too much in innovation. But altogether should be elements that are defined somewhere and that brings innovation generally on that strategic level. I think that's what's important at the end.
Oh, thank you. So next, I wanted to kind of move on to talk about organizational structure, because actually this is one of the main things in the white paper, is about how to really set up your organization and the structure of it to succeed at strategic innovation. You talk about organizational ambidexterity, and Hans mentioned it briefly in his intro as well. Can you give us, just so everyone's on the same page, a concise kind of simple explanation of what you mean when you talk about the ambidextrous organization?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a bit of a complex topic to talk about, and probably everybody has its own definition. Maybe from academia, it's more so for everybody who knows it, it's coming from the challenge more of that you usually have an existing business, so that's your exploitation, right? So that's what you want to make money with. You optimize it, and so you want to run it as efficient and optimized as possible. And you have but then if you develop new business, you have to more explore than exploit, and that requires different things. You can't just explore very optimized and efficiently. You would have to experiment and learn and try and so on. So doing both things for the same people or the same unit is often difficult because it requires like very different methods and thinking and goals, etc. And the big question and then ambidexterity, it's using both hands. So it's basically the idea to bring explore and exploit together. And usually I add what's described a bit also as a holy grail of ambidexterity is not just to do both somewhere. So, okay, somewhere in the organization, somebody explores, somebody exploits, so I'm ambidextrous. No, the holy grail is to bring it together. So what you want to achieve is that you use where you're currently exploiting. So you use your current business, your current competitive advantages to develop and be successful in things that you explore. So exploration needs your exploitation, and and then exploitation needs exploration, because that's the future business. So you have to really think how to bring both together. And that's a big challenge here. So a bit abstractly spoken, but I think everybody can find examples for it, right? So yeah. For this problem.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this really resonates with Felix and Daniel. I was talking to in our breakout actually that they've got a clear core business and also looking to, explore new business areas, and I think quite possibly by leveraging their existing competitive advantages and capabilities that you have. If Felix or Daniel, if you wanted to just jump in a little bit and just sort of share, because I think yours is a really good example of where ambidexterity sort of feels like an obvious solution.
So thanks for bringing this up. This is what we were talking about in our breakout a bit. We are looking for this way to the Holy Grail that was just described. And it's a journey at this point, because we are struggling to convince the organization, to convince our top management that ambidexterity is needed, that we need to break out from our exploitation more than we thought, and to really transfer these core competencies, capabilities, and USPs, competitive advantages now to new fields. And this is exactly what we are trying to achieve at the moment within our organization, to set up new structures, to set up new governance models, decision making, to come closer to that end goal, to achieve that Holy Grail. And what we can say so far, it's incredibly difficult to bring everybody on the same page and to convince many people in the organization, especially since we are, just as a side note, in automotive supplier business, where you are fighting against incredible headwinds economically.
Yeah. So I get the problem, and I'm also now working already for some time with an automotive supplier, or like they're also supplying others, but mainly automotive supplier, and for them, just like in other companies, I rather talk about ambidexterity with them and say, okay, you need to explore, now you're exploiting, and this is ambidexterity. That's like, not most people in the management are not very interested, like, to learn a concept. What they're interested is like achieving their objectives, and do they have, will they do that in the future? So that's where we are normally starting from, quite simply. So very more strategic approach. So even leave out innovation if you want, just check with them what are actually the objectives. What's our current business? Can we reach these objectives in the future? If there is a gap, it's pretty clear, okay, we have to come up with something to fill the gap. Maybe they already have some strategic projects, maybe they have some M&A, whatever, but mostly they will realize, okay, we have to leverage whatever we are doing in research development, or, maybe we have to do some more innovation. We somehow have to fill this gap. And then you have at least a good, or at least for us, then that's a good ground to then discuss how to actually do it. And then we usually, what's also described in the white paper, we usually then talk with them. We do a quick check with them and show them these are like kind of capabilities that are required in the organization. So from also the research, we could define like 5 quite easily understandable for every management in a few minutes capabilities for the organization. It's from, okay, can you scope? Can you actually, define your strategic frame? Do you have KPIs, and do you know your chances and risks? Can you actually, then you have configuration? Do you actually know what projects and opportunities there are? Can you assess them, review them, and then following capabilities are more about, can you actually, systematically develop new opportunities, address them with new solutions, etc. And then they pretty easily see, if they do a lot of exploitation, they see, we are not that great actually in finding new opportunities, or we don't do it systematically and so on. And then that's okay. Then you discuss next stage, okay, then where can we build up these capabilities? Should it be everywhere in the organization or in the business unit, or should it be in the corporate R&D and the others, helping, whatever. Then you have different organizational forms how you can solve it. And then you're actually discussing about ambidexterity because, you are discussing where are these capabilities, how they are connected, if they are in the corporate, how do they connect with the business unit, etc. But you never had to explain that. And so it's a bit of a stepwise process, because then, of course, from there you have to get into, okay, but then I need some structures and processes and interfaces to actually apply these capabilities. And then that's the next step, and automatically you get there. Now, of course, it was a bit of a quick tour, and it takes also a long time when we do it with companies, because it's a kind of change project, of course. But at least you talk always a bit the language of the management, because they know, okay, that's objectives we need, that's capabilities for these objectives. Okay, I need some structure for the capabilities. That's all things they know. So it's always helpful not to come too much from a world of innovation or ambidexterity that maybe they are not so familiar with, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now we covered a lot of things.
Sounds like you are working with us on this project.
I don't think you're alone at all.
What company were you from, actually?
Are you German? I mean, you are based in Germany, but are you familiar with the? Okay, it's called Marquardt. It's a small automotive supplier with like 1.4 billion euros, but we are not one of the heavyweights.
Yeah. Okay. We are not working with you, but with some similar ones. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Felix and Daniel. I appreciate it. So, Lysander, the concept of ambidexterity and ambidextrous organizations has been around, as you say in your white paper, for over 2 decades. And I actually remember, I think the very first book I ever picked up on innovation talked about ambidexterity, and my eyes kind of popped open and I thought, yes, this is the answer. When we've talked about it and for so long, why are so few companies practicing it?
Yeah, because I think what was there 2 decades ago, and for most of the time, was a lot of, okay, everybody found a term to describe the problem, but it didn't really offer an applicable solution, right? It's just like, yeah, you should do both. And then it's called ambidexterity. And you're like, yeah, but how do I do both? And how do I connect it? That's not really answered. Then, of course, there was some suggestion, and there's research that it can work, It's like either you have the kind of structural ambidexterity, and you put it, you have explore units and exploit units, etc. These were a bit the go-to solution, but I think they have this problem that we touched a bit already upon, that if you just separate explore, how do you connect it back to actually add strategic value to your company? You rather, if you separate it, you have these innovation units that are doing cool stuff somewhere, but it rarely then connects back to the company and kind of phases out usually. And the solution in structural ambidexterity usually are then the overall vision, and the top management team should then connect it back to each other. But, if you actually need innovation to develop your company, that's a big job for the management team to then connect all the different projects back together. So you need some more structures and systems to do that in the organization, and not depend on some people somehow magically doing it. So that's why I think this solution is not really applicable once you need innovation for your company development. It's applicable if you want to do it on the side, but not if you want to do it strategically. And that's why now what I was researching a lot, on a lot of innovation units and so on, was how they are structured, and are there some that actually manage to be maybe dedicated units because it makes sense. You develop, your own methods and skills and so on to do innovation, but can they maybe actually connect with the more exploiting business units, etc., to really come up with solutions that help the company in the future?
Yeah.
And it's possible, but it requires, to build up the system and not just to say, okay, now we have a separate unit and this can do stuff. Yeah. Then you really have to think about the system, how it works.
So this might be a useful moment, if you've got it to hand, Lysander, to share, as all good consultants do. Lysander has a great 2x2 that
not the only
looks at you're not the only one, there's many, that looks at the different ways in which to approach ambidexterity in an organization, and your recommendation on what you think is most likely to stand the highest chance of success. Do you want to share that and just talk us through?
Yeah, let me try. Okay, maybe you see it. No, yeah,
yep,
now
we're
you
seeing
see
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bit what I talked a bit before. Now that's the theoretical framework, so not really directly applicable, but it highlights the one point I wanted to do. So if we think, where do we actually connect exploration, exploitation? Is it that we want the whole organization to do both, or is it that we have some dedicated entities? That's like one axis here, and then question is a bit, how do I do it? Do I really want to have the paradox where I do both together, which, as explained, is necessary if you want some strategic value from it directly, or can I afford, so to say, a trade-off where I have exploit and it brings my business, and I do exploration on the side to maybe have some unplanned innovations that are then bring me some cool value, but I don't really need it. And then so on the trade-off one, we have the described structural ambidexterity, so the classic example of, okay, now I have my business and then I build like an innovation lab, but it's completely separated and it sits, I don't know, in Silicon Valley and it's coming up with cool ideas. That's nice if your overall business doesn't really need these ideas, because if they work out, nice. If not, also okay for the company. Yeah. So that's the easy solution to set up, but not the one that brings most strategic value. But that's why a lot did it, because it's rather easy to implement. We have the sequential, we can forget a bit about it because it's more a transformation thing. You do exploitation and then at some point in time, your whole company actually needs a new business. So you explore and then you're in a new business model. I think this is a bit outdated because we have too quick change cycles to change every time the company between exploration and exploitation. So it's a bit more a solution for more stable environments with a few changes every couple of years or something. And then, of course, the interesting ones are the paradox, because that's what we need for strategic value, is to connect exploration, exploitation. Then there was always this contextual ambidexterity, which describes, okay, can we not just have like employees switching between both, because then they can always connect it, the classical, the business guy, and like in Google, you get like, the Friday you work on new projects and the rest of the week you do your core business. That's also nice. But of course, when you want, it's a bit much to ask from an employee to spend 20% of his time and come up with strategically relevant future business of the company. So it's nice for some kind of exploration, but not if you actually need this for your development. And what we saw now in the research, and what we also do in practice usually, is that some dedicated entities like R&D departments or innovation labs, or whatever you want to call it, who are tasked with more exploration and innovation, are managed to really build interfaces and structures and governance to connect back themselves with a company. So they're kind of connected ambidextrous units, because they not only explore and somebody else has to integrate it back, but they actually, through their processes, interface and so on, manage to explore and exploit and connect back. And of course, you already see it's difficult to explain, so that needs more thinking in the setup, and that's why it's not so easy to implement as just putting an innovation lab in Silicon Valley. But once it's applied and running, and you can often use a lot from what's already there, you really have basically these capabilities, ambidexterity in a unit, instead of needing it in some management team, etc. So we have really built it into the organization, and that, of course, is then really a long-term advantage And maybe just one, sorry, it's in German, but a very simple view is, you have a unit, and this unit needs to have formal and informal interfaces with the management strategy that we already discussed, with like business units and other operator functions to be able to themselves, integrate them. Usually, for instance, there's a project organization where people from business units and from innovation units can work together depending on who you need in a project. And of course, they also have to link with the external environment. So in the research, we saw some units, innovation labs, they have one small link to management and a lot of linking to the external environment. And they are completely decoupled from the rest of the business to be innovative. But a few units really managed to build all these interfaces, and we could see that these are the ones creating much more strategic innovation, so to say. But with a bit more complex setup, unfortunately.
Thank you for sharing those. Lysander, that's really helpful. So, I think what I'm hearing there, is it's a line, isn't it, to walk between a degree of separation, so as that you don't have unhelpful, perhaps, interference from the core business, and obviously the explore environment requires a different set of tools, approaches, behaviours, kind of mindset. So you do want a degree of separation, but maintaining those linkages is essential. And I think from your experience, what you've seen is where people aim for an ambidextrous setup, they go too far in terms of the separation and they lose that connective tissue. Why do you think that is? And I think from my experience, that's the thing I have seen to be hardest as well, is retaining enough independence, but also retaining that connective tissue and being able in particular to leverage the core business assets. Why do you think that is such a challenge when it comes to, building an ambidextrous organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that the job of the operative business is a different one. And so usually, if it's not, defined that business units have some capacity for that as well. So you basically need to build in some organizational slack or some capacity also in the other units to be able to help, because otherwise, very, very practically, you will ask somebody who has 100% job to now do something else while he's measured on his 100% job. So just on a personal level, it's already tough to pull off, and then that multiplies in the organization. So you can build your unit, but then of course you have to also see, if you want to work with other parts of the organization, do they actually have the time? Do they have the objectives to do that, etc.? And that's why it's that's why it's more complex to set up. You don't need all of it to start. It's you can start with pretty easy things. You have your goals, you maybe build a portfolio framework, and you invite some people to think and assess projects together on it. And from there, you can build up other interfaces and so on over time. So I don't say you have to design for 2 years a very complex system until you can do innovation. It's just that if you want to have the full capabilities in the end, then you will come out with a rather complex system, which is normal because established organizations are usually complex. And so it's so much easier, of course, often to say, okay, we do a very separate one, because they can really focus on innovation. So for all stages, to come up with ideas, to test ideas, to develop them, maybe even to bring them to the market, it seems so much easier. So why bother, of building all this complexity? It's just that in the end, if they, the traction, the scaling, the relevancy for the company in the very end is usually missing. So you only see that after a couple of years that this doesn't add so much value. But until then, you can easily do it. And it sounds and is much easier than saying, okay, but we have to bring all the stakeholders together and think how we can collaborate, and have to change some things in the core. And I need some people from there. It's already, if you just want to innovate, that's not what you want to get into. But if you want to have strategic impact, that of course what you need to get into, because you're dealing with organization, right?
So maybe this answers then, because in terms of what I'm hearing there is if you don't have that connective tissue back to the core, it makes it harder to scale any ventures that you do develop in your Explore unit. Because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, do companies, in your view, have to build new ventures themselves, or is a strategy of acquisitions an approach? Because obviously a lot of companies say, we don't have the time, we don't have the skills to do this in-house. We're going to achieve this growth through acquisition. And I was just curious to know your thought on that.
No, I think that's like you can build, you can buy, you can partner. Like that's more the execution question. But before you come to this question, you still need to walk the walk and actually have strategically relevant solutions that you want to do. And then if you do them through M&A, or if you develop them yourself, that's your execution question. But you won't just randomly buy companies for your future business. So you will have to have an idea of what you want to buy and why and how it adds to your business. So the problem stays the same, however, whatever you do in the end.
Yeah.
And yes, so it's a scaling problem. Of course, the separate units, they also would say, but that's, we can scale because we maybe buy or build startups and they can get external funding as well, and they can grow up in the market and so on. But it usually doesn't match with what the company needs. You can't build as many companies as a VC. So it's just, you would need to build so many startups to actually create a value that's relevant for a large company that it just doesn't work out. So you kind of need to have this competitive advantage in your scaling. So you need to somehow leverage something from the company. Otherwise your chances are so slim that you can't exceed. And I just thought a couple of weeks ago, there was a guy told me he was working at a large insurance company, and they were funding these projects for like 5 years. I think they put like a triple-digit million into building new ventures, and in the end, what happened is that all the ventures are closed now. So yes, some came to the market and so on, and it's quite typical because at some point, the management says, but it's just not coming enough out of it, and the topics are not that relevant. Let's just take the money and rather put it into, I don't know, the AI transformation for the core business or whatever, then it has an easier strategic value. And so you have to somehow bring the strategic value in your innovation if you want to do it for more than a couple of years. And you won't be able to do it if you stay too separate. I know there's also the challenge of being too integrated. That's why it's good to still do it in dedicated units and with some on budgeting, etc. But then really building this kind of tissue, which is a really nice picture that you put here.
Yeah. Excellent. So you touched on this earlier. You mentioned about sometimes innovation units can be a little reticent to step into this role, actually, and sort of see themselves as the idea generators, and that's as far as their responsibility goes. And I wanted to talk about that a bit more, actually, with you. And, what is your experience of how prepared kind of existing innovation units are to take on the responsibility for strategic innovation and also to hold themselves accountable for the impact they're having, even when perhaps no one else in the organization is holding them accountable for that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think that's exactly the problem. You might not feel so prepared because maybe your career is in innovation, and innovation is about, the methods of producing ideas and testing and maybe going to market. But your career was not built on, how do I, bring up future strategy for the company, or how do I bring up strategic solutions to fulfill objectives? And also then if you're not sure about that, then you don't want to be accountable for it. So of course, then a lot are restraining from, it would be good for steering innovation if we would have some strategic objectives for it, but then I would have to fulfill these objectives. So I rather not ask for them, because then I can do what I want, and that's the easier solution. but so generally, of course, we are talking about a case here that you want or have to bring some more strategic value to your innovation efforts. Often it's like if you don't want to, at some point you have to. So it's in any way good to address it. And what I see is, I think it's okay if you're more from innovation, because then you can do some workarounds, right? So as we said before, you might just want to work closer together with strategy if there is somebody doing that, or with the management, and you don't have to provide the full solution from the beginning. But I also often see that it's especially people who are not coming from a pure innovation background in the innovation team that would drive. So if you have somebody from strategy or business development or other roles that are more, used to do kind of strategic planning and analyze, etc., into an innovation team, then these people know what to do, and they usually ask for, okay, but how do we structure this? How do we measure what we do on which objectives? And why they're not there, I will get them, etc. So it's good if you don't have it in your team, maybe bringing this in or collaborate with people like that if you don't want to do it yourself, because then you can also build this more strategic capability in your innovation team, right?
Yeah. No, I really hear that. And I think there are sort of kind of those two types of innovators. That there is the very creative idea generating innovator. And then there are those, that are really, really focused on, the future business and having impact. And I think those people in particular, that latter description, are really actually quite few and far between, that have both the kind of innovation mindset and understand, that we need a different set of behaviours here in Explore, but also have that focus on outcome, strategic alignment, and metrics where necessary. I think that they're rare, and I think if you're them or you spot them in your organisation, I think you grab them to lead your innovation efforts with both hands. Absolutely.
Yeah. And otherwise, of course, and if you don't have them, just find them in your organization or outside of the organization, and you can build it up. Another complication is that in the best case, it's not only in innovation, but the most successful projects I'm doing is where you actually have a management board or CTO or somebody who also have this mindset and drives it, which you have, for instance, a lot of very technically focused CTOs who are not that interested in driving future strategy for the company or in looking at new markets, etc. So it starts at this level already. And of course, if you don't have it at this level, you can try to drive it from a lower one. But the best is, of course, if you have it from the top already somewhere there. And this is not always in your hands. So
no, it's not. It's
you sometimes have to find a bit your way around. But I see some, who then work with strategy to find the way, and then more like showing what can get out of it and bringing the management to it. And sometimes that's necessary as well. So
that's great. Just tell us briefly then, just on that though, you mentioned kind of, I think in your white paper, you call them kind of innovation steering groups, they might be called growth boards or investment boards, and the kind of process around idea selection, and, how they move things through an ideas or innovation pipeline. What's your experience of them, and any kind of words of wisdom for people here that are looking at that sort of process?
Yeah, I think mostly they're used to have a kind of peer group, and it's on paper a good interface of what we were talking about, a good tissue maybe to connect with management, with maybe business units. What's important is a bit more than how you do it, I think. So what we usually try is to build up this kind of objectives, KPIs, in which we use for all the projects to assess a portfolio. And these objectives should be agreed with everybody who sits in these boards, because only then you can actually show a portfolio with assessed projects or opportunities, and then discuss, okay, do you agree with the assessment or whatever? But if you don't have it, you will come in a situation where, you're pitching some projects, and on a single project basis, it's like decided if it's good or not. Every project is somehow presented different, has, different potential that are mentioned, and it's maybe about how well was the pitch or how good was the storytelling. But it should really be, you want to not look at single projects, right? You want to always optimize your portfolio. So you want to compare this opportunity with the ones that are already there. So you need them. So you need this kind of common decision framework, however you design it. And this should be transparent, and this should be applied. And then if you have this, then you can use these boards really, really well to then discuss very objectively, so to say. And if you don't have it, you come into this pitch situation, and it sounds always good to say, okay, it's like a VC and you can pitch a project and then we maybe fund it, but you have to consider it's not a VC, because a startup would go to 100 VCs to pitch a project. So every pitch is learning and improving. In the company, it would go once to the board, pitch it, the board would say no, and the project is dead. So it's a completely different system. There's no learning, there's no 100 times pitching. So you can't really apply the same logic in the company. You should rather be transparent on how you assess projects, so that everybody who's presenting one already has the right information to decide on it.
And do you recommend that there is representation from the core business on these, or not? As part of the decision making?
I mean, usually what we see in companies, I think it's good also, and it's also necessary in terms of stakeholder management, that you usually have some different levels, right? So you have a kind of meeting cascade or something, and you might have, the board and maybe the CEOs, so to say, of the business units or something. So they, might be on top, and they look maybe, twice a year on the portfolio and take, more portfolio strategy decisions. While, you might have then maybe some clusters, where you have specific divisions in it, and maybe clustered your innovation project as well. So, if you're a bigger company, you might have an energy cluster, and then you have relevant people from business and from your innovation, and you only discuss then the topics for energy, etc. And, another discusses for mobility or whatsoever, for instance. And if you're a smaller company, you can probably do one board with some people from the business units. So it depends a bit on the size and how many business units you have and so on. But I would always, to have this tissue, I would definitely have, the management, the business units, and in the best case, also maybe externals in it because that's your chance to, connect the things early and bring them in the right direction. Because if you have an agreement there, then you do your innovation project. Then later you will, of course, still check again and reevaluate if it works as planned and so on. But you already agreed together that you're going in the right direction, and to do that early on and then regularly again is very important.
Yeah, thank you, Lysander. So I was just going to ask if there's any, further questions really from everybody listening today. I can see something from Catherine. We have to get pushback from business units along the lines of, we are busy doing the business, we don't have time for innovation. Yeah, I think that's really common. Catherine, do you want to come off mute and talk to that anymore, or ask Lysander any specific advice around that?
Thank you. I was just going to say that even if we do have the mindset in our leadership about being innovative, sometimes that doesn't translate into making space for innovation. And I was just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed the problem a bit before that, if you want to leverage core business, you might actually have some capacity for it. So of course, in the best case, you're managing over time to build that capacity. So in your resource planning, you have actually space for innovation. If you don't have, I would at least, then you can see what can you do with yourself. So maybe don't use the people so much in specific innovation projects and to do a lot of things. But the minimum I think you can do is what we just discussed, have some relevant people on some boards where you look at the portfolio, so they take the decisions together and everybody knows which direction. And usually when you have them integrated in the decision-making process, that automatically then creates buy in to also then have people, because if they looked, if somebody from the business unit took at least maybe 2 hours and look at the portfolio with you, which should be possible, and then decided, yeah, but that's a really good direction. I'm also, everybody's on the same KPI. I think that's really a good potential, and so on should be done. Yeah, that's in my area as well, and so on. If they're involved in this decision making, then they're also more easily maybe finding some resources. If of course, if you come and say, okay, I came up with this innovation project and now I need some people, and nobody knows why, and nobody thought they had some say in if you do this project or not, then it's always difficult to get the resources. So first step and most efficient, because not very time consuming step, I would say, is to really integrate people in the decision making on more the portfolio kind of basis, not on everything in a project, of course, and then through the decision making get to the resources, because they are behind the decisions.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lysander. Any more? We're nearly at time. I know we've got a couple of minutes. If there was anything else that anybody wanted to ask, I'd also be really interested just to hear, what's your biggest takeaway from this conversation today? What's resonated most strongly with you? What do you want to sort of go off and talk to somebody else about? What have been your insights? Catherine, I like the concept of generating buy-in by engaging the frontline staff, and identifying KPIs. Cool, yeah. I mean, you go into this a little bit, don't you, in the white paper, Lysander, about actual implementation of this. The need to really bring some kind of project discipline, really, in terms of how you actually set it up and get it going. And the importance of metrics in that. I'm a big fan of metrics, impact metrics especially.
Impact,
things like that.
Important.
Yeah, absolutely. Ambidextrous innovation, back to front of mind, will align within my org. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. Well, Lysander, thank you very much. It's been fascinating for me. As I said at the beginning, it's a topic I'm hugely interested in and care deeply about. I don't think organizations can really have a future unless they take this kind of stuff seriously. And I think innovation efforts can only ever get so far when there's no kind of strategic intent or alignment behind what we're doing. As nice as it may feel to do kind of crazy roundabout innovation, we're all here really to make things better, to make the world better, to make our companies better, to make people's lives better. And we can only do that really when we do that with intent. So thank you very much for talking to us today and explaining to us, really clearly what this is about and some practical steps for how people can take this forward. Thank you.